Bad communication costs businesses $37 billion per year, and chances are it's costing you too. My guest is Celeste Headlee. She's one of the most watched TED speakers of all time and a global authority on conversation. And she's going to show you how you can save money with great communication. Celeste, billions upon billions of dollars could be saved with good, clear communications. How?
Yeah, I mean, as of 2022, which was the most recent data I could find, the cost of poor communication in the United States alone hit about $37 billion. Let me break that down just a little bit. Poor communication wastes about 7 or 8 hours a week per worker, which is about 18% of what anybody is paying in salary.
Yeah.
So you're paying nearly 20% of your salaries just to bad communication. And it's such an unforced error. You know, we're talking about billions of dollars that could be saved. You know, I could save people billions right now just by getting them to stop using email for everything. Just that change alone could save billions of dollars. And that's what I mean when I say it's an unforced error. It's such a silly way to waste money.
What is it wasted on? Emails, you said, but how?
Well, I mean, email's a time suck. I mean, it wastes a massive amount of time. It's such an inefficient method of communication. Yeah. We think it's efficient. We think it's saving us time. But email's been around for a long time, which means we have reams and reams of research in this. And so we can say definitively it takes much more time to communicate through email than it does over the phone.
Over the phone, for instance. Yeah, having real conversations. Absolutely. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And conversations, I mean, you wrote a book about communications. We Need to Talk, How to Have Conversations That Matter, which is fantastic, highly recommended. What's weird is that conversations is something, you know, we're born with almost, right? We pick it up when we're a few years old, we practice it, we have conversations all the time. And yet even you and I as communications experts, at least in my case, I find sometimes I really suck at this. I could be better at it for sure.
Yeah, I'm always a work in progress. You know, I like to think of it this way, you know, because our species, Homo sapiens, survived through communication, not through advanced intelligence or skill, certainly not speed or resilience, right? Like you change the temperature by 5 or 10 degrees and we get uncomfortable. But it was our ability to communicate and collaborate that has allowed us to survive on the planet. Yeah. So I like to think of it like the very first movie in a superhero series, right? When they first get their superpowers, but they don't know how to use them yet. So they're like running into walls and falling and stuff. That's sort of where we all start. Like we have this superhuman skill, this incredible power, which is our extremely sophisticated communication skills. That's part of Homo sapiens skill set. But you do have to learn how to use it, right? And that we don't focus on that. Think of all the public speaking courses that are offered in schools and not a single one in how to listen. And yet listening is the more difficult half of that equation, right? We don't teach each other how to communicate properly. We have one of the biggest parts of our daily work life is meetings, and yet we almost never train people in how to hold a meeting. So it's really silly that we just don't focus on the one thing which is the most important part of what we do.
Yes. And it's pretty much all we do at work these days. I mean, if you're knowledge worker, if you're a leader, then communication is what you do. The data says 88% of your time. You know, could say communication is work for most people these days, whether that's emails, meetings, conversations, speaking, calls, etc. It's pretty much what we do, yet so little attention is paid to it. From your perspective, I mean, I would love to hear a little bit about your backstory. You've been working in communications and with communications for a long time, but how did you get into it?
Well, I'm a professional opera singer by trade, which is a kind of communication. But my day job since 1999 has been journalism, which is another form of communications. And I did not study journalism. So I had to, once I was on the job, I had to learn my job. So I focused a lot of my attention on interviewing skills, how to interview. And, you know, you've been doing this podcast for 7 years or so, you know, an interview is just a formalized, time-limited conversation.
That's right.
Right?
Well put.
So I was reading a lot of books and research on communication, only to find that the communication advice we've been getting is bad. It's not only not effective, it's counterproductive. You know, that advice we've all gotten, and I talk about this in my TED Talk, nod your head to show you agree, or
3
say,
times.
Right, exactly.
As if 4 times is bad and 2 times is not quite
I know,
there yet.
exactly.
It's 3
Based
times.
on what? Did you test this at all? And one of the things I like to give as an example all the time is one of the piece of advice they give you is to hold eye contact. But, I tested that out. If you hold eye contact with someone, it's uncomfortable. Yeah. It's very uncomfortable. So that's sort of where all of this started for me. The true, in-depth research was because we'd been getting such bad advice for so long that I was like, okay, I'm going to have to start from scratch. And that's sort of where it all started.
You mentioned listening noises as well in the TED Talk. And I had to chuckle, to be honest, because when I started this podcast 7 years ago, I made a lot of listening noises. Because I thought that's how you do it, right? And you listen to the recordings. It's terrible. It's terrible. And I stopped doing it. I hope I stopped doing it. And you make this great point in the book as well, that if you're really listening, you don't have to pretend to listen. You don't even have to think about nodding and making noises, etc. It will be obvious to the other person that you're listening, because we as humans are actually pretty good at picking up these signals.
Yeah, we're naturally gifted at it. And the other thing is that when you are naturally listening, a lot of your conversation will be questions, and especially follow-up questions. And there's been a ton of research this, especially featured in the Harvard Business Review, on the power of the follow-up question, right? How powerful that is, how it has this, unique ability to make people feel heard, to make them feel as though you're friendly. And I'm like, of course it does, because how do you ask a follow-up question unless you're listening, right? The power of the follow-up question is just the power of listening.
Yes, and terrible conversation means you're jumping from subject to subject. You're talking about, Harvard Business Review studies and what it shows, and I go somewhere else. I'm not really having a conversation. So in a way, you're totally right. Follow-up questions are natural result of listening and going deeper into something, which is when conversations get interesting, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're going to have questions. Yeah. People are going to say stuff. And, you've probably heard these interviews also where it's clear the interviewer isn't listening. The person will say, well, how did you become a rock star or whatever? They say, well, I growing up in Oakland or whatever, I experienced a lot of abuse. And then I went on to da-da-da. And the person will say, so how are you feeling about the upcoming concert? And you're like, whoa. Wait a second, go back. It's so clear when someone isn't listening, especially in an interview. Yeah. It's painful when someone is not listening. It feels like disrespect, not just to the listener, but to the person who's being interviewed.
Yeah. You must have interviewed thousands of people as an NPR host, and you kindly pass on what you've learned in terms of conversation skills. So how can we have better conversations? What are your top tips?
The number one thing is to stop entering conversations worried about what you're going to say, and just focus on what it is you might hear from the other person. So often we see conversations as a means of showing how much we know or educating the other person. And I can just relieve you of that stress right now in terms of I'm going to change their opinion or educate them. You're not. Like, we have zero scientific evidence that over a course of a conversation you can educate anybody or change their minds on anything. In fact, the human brain hates getting advice, hates it. There's only 2 situations in which a conversation is not good for you physically and emotionally, and that's if it's hostile and if you're getting advice. And who are big-brained social animals, we react to getting advice from someone, even if we've asked for the advice. In the same way, our brain launches the exact same sequence as though we've just been punched in the face. So that's the number one thing, is stop telling people what to do. If they say, oh my God, I loved this book so much, do not respond with, oh, you'd love this other book also. That's a form of advice, right? So stop telling other people what to do. You hate it also. Like, I'm not sure where the disconnect comes from. We hate it when people do that to us. And then we turn around and respond to other people by giving them advice or
good.
tips. Yeah, exactly. It does
I know
feel
something.
good.
I want to share that with you. Yeah,
yes,
it feels
exactly.
good, but it's not appropriate. So what's the goal of the conversation then? If it's not to give advice and it's not to persuade the other person, which I agree is super, super hard.
Yeah. I mean, if you've walked away from a conversation and you haven't learned anything, then it wasn't a productive conversation.
Yes. I agree.
So, yeah. I mean, and you talked, you and I both have the benefit of talking to people who are smarter than we are, right? Who have done more than we have done.
Oh, yes.
And the beauty of that is it keeps you humble, but B, you learn so many interesting things, right? And when you start getting into that habit of looking forward to conversations because you're going to learn something cool or interesting, it's addictive. It's so enjoyable to learn new stuff from other people. And what is it? Bill Nye says everybody you will ever meet knows something you don't, right? We don't go into conversations trying to figure out what that is. And that's crazy to me. People know cool stuff.
Yeah. Is it another objective that the other person learns something as well, so that we learn from each other, or is that secondary?
Yeah, I mean, they will learn it from you. I mean, I never worry about other people talking enough. And I get this question all the time when I'm doing like workshops and keynotes. People will say, well, if I follow your rules, I'll never get to speak. I'm not worried about that. Yeah. Research that began at Harvard shows that talking about yourself and what you like and what you know activates the same pleasure center in your brain as sex and heroin.
Okay.
Yeah, and in that experiment, they offered participants more money to talk about anything else. And they turned down the extra money, right? That's how much we love to talk about ourselves and our likes and our dislikes and our opinions. So I'm not worried that you're not going to talk enough. You will, and the other person will learn from you.
It's true. I mean, it's really also for me as a host and you as well, I guess, it's not hard to get people to talk about themselves and what they're passionate about. It's actually one of the easier things to do. How to make it accessible and easy to everyone's listening, I think that is slightly more tricky, because people can go down rabbit holes, and obviously they know so much that sometimes it's our job then to channel it.
Yeah, they data dump on you. But there's a host of a public radio program here in the U.S. The show is called Fresh Air. Terry Gross, the host, always says that the only conversation opener you'll ever need is tell me about yourself. And it's very true.
That is true. What else can we do to become better conversationalists?
Another thing is that, acknowledge that it's not easy to listen. Right? You're not going to listen to a keynote or this episode and be like, I'm going to be a better listener from now on. That's not how it works. We got this great set of data from the school systems in Australia and New Zealand where they were trying to figure out how to teach listening. And the takeaway was you have to actually teach listening. Right? You have to practice it specifically. You don't learn how to listen while you're studying history or anything else. You have to focus on listening itself. So that's number one, acknowledge that it's difficult. And sometimes you won't have the energy to do so. Listening is the most, having a conversation is the most cognitively demanding and significant and sophisticated thing that our brains do.
Yeah.
In fact, there's evidence that the only reason our brains or ape brains got bigger was in order to be in relationships with other people. So it's going to be hard, and you're always going to be a work in progress, and it's going to require your attention. So go into each conversation saying, okay, this is going to be difficult, and my brain is going to go off on tangents, and each time I'm going to pull it back. Right? That's going to help you a lot.
Yeah. So be humble and also be kind to yourself, right? Not beating ourselves up afterwards. Oh, why did I say this? And I didn't properly listen. It's natural. Speaking comes a little more naturally to us, but listening is a skill we can develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can become a better listener. You aren't born either a good listener or a bad listener, just like you're not born either an empathetic person or an unempathetic person, unless you're a sociopath, right? These are skills that you can develop and improve, and or you can lose them also if you're not using them, but you can strengthen them.
Yeah, 100%. What about emotion versus logic? How important is it that we inject emotions and or logic into conversations?
Very glad you asked this question, because conversations aren't logical. We have this, it makes me laugh when I hear people say, let's not bring emotion into this. That's so ridiculous. For our species, you're not going to have a conversation that doesn't involve emotions. That's, we're not an IBM computer. We are Homo sapiens. We are big-brained social animals, and emotion is important data for us. So every conversation is going to have emotion in it, but also it's important. Like, you need to pay attention to emotions. That's information that you are either, relaying or receiving. And we're not particularly logical. That's not the way our minds work. If you look at, like, they have a wheel of cognitive biases, all the ways in which our brains lie to us, and it's massive, right? It is very, very easy to fool, delude, trick, distract the human brain. And so you cannot rely on your logic. You can't.
You can't. Yet in business, and with business leaders, I often find that logic comes naturally, right? Here's the logic, here's the plan, this is what we're going to do. And then you almost have to go back and say, okay, but there are these two gatekeepers in the brain, which are instinct and emotion. We have to think about those as well, and ideally start with them and take people on this journey from the instinctive to the emotional to the logical. So you're not even allowed to talk about logic before you address the emotional side of the brain. And that seems to be something that maybe people used to understand, but through education, university, being on the job for a long time, gets lost. So almost you have to unlearn what they learned over the years in order to come to more human-to-human level of communication.
Yeah, it's complicated, right? What you're talking about is organizational psychologists refer to as the expertise trap. And we know that the more one thinks of oneself as an expert, in inverse ratio almost, your learning curve declines. So the more likely you are to think of yourself as an expert, the less you're learning. Means, some new employee that you hired because they're bright and have lots of great ideas, and they come into your meeting with an idea, and you, who have been doing it this particular way for 2 decades, are like, that sounds crazy to me, right? You're not, even these new ideas don't seem right because you're relying on the information you already have instead of widening your depth of knowledge. And it becomes a trap. Absolutely becomes a trap. So here's the problem. You're not making logical decisions. There's no such thing as a purely logical human decision. It does not exist. Also, the other end of that spectrum, though, which is equally dangerous, is those who rely on gut instinct. Because there is no more part of your brain that is susceptible to bias and discrimination than gut instinct. But the great part of this is accepting this with no shame. This is just how our brains work. Can also lead you to realize that the safety for this is always other people. Over and over again, we have found that if you just poll people, if you poll a large group of people, you will arrive at a more accurate and effective answer than if you rely on the 5 or 6 people around you that are part of your team. Right? And this has been shown in terms of mergers and acquisitions, some of the most consequential decisions that a boss makes. If you polled everybody in your company, including the janitorial staff, research shows that answer will be better than the one you come up with in your C-suite meeting. But we don't, never do that. We never, and we've known this for literally hundreds of years. I'll give you an example, and it comes from a great book called The Wisdom of Crowds. At one point, the U.S. Navy lost a submarine in the Atlantic Ocean. Could not find it. They brought in the best experts they could absolutely find on ocean currents and, oceanography, etc. Could not find the submarine. So one of the guys on the team was like, you know what, I'm gonna run a poll. And he literally asked everybody, his grocery store clerk, his grandma, and he would show him a map and he'd say, this is where we last had contact with the submarine. This is where it was headed. Take a guess. And he averaged their answers and they found the submarine.
Okay, wow.
This is how human brains are designed to work.
Yeah.
We work as groups. We are a hive mind, right? None of us think that an individual bee is particularly genius, but working together, bees accomplish incredible things. This is exactly how human beings work. So when we're talking about, business people trying to rely on either their logic or their gut instinct, rely on neither. Understand that both of those things are inherently flawed, and rely on your team. And by team, I mean team writ large.
Team writ large, absolutely. And how do you train that in an organization? We can obviously develop our skills based on the information we share and you can get elsewhere. But as an organization, you say, I want my team, my employees, my staff to become better communicators, better listeners. How do you go about this?
So the biggest stumbling block to better communication on your team is your own communication, right? If you see communication from management as being heavily gatekept, right? Like you do not have transparency, you don't bring employees in until a decision has been made and is already in progress, right? If you have closed doors meetings, if you don't only communicate with your team members when something is going wrong, if that's the kind of poor communication skills that you have, that's the kind of poor communication skills
will be emulated, right?
Will have. Absolutely. They're going to model that because that's what they think you want. And also they think that's the culture they will adapt to the culture of the business. And I see this all the time. I get called in and paid a good amount of money to give keynotes and workshops in communication, and the C-suite executives are never there.
That's a shame. That's a shame. And that's a signal, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a waste of money in a way. Why are you spending all this money to improve your employees' communications, in which I'm going to tell them don't send emails after hours, and then their boss is sending them emails at 9 p.m. on a Thursday night, right?
Yeah.
It's just not. It's not helpful.
Makes sense. It's also my experience is really, the tone is set and the communications culture is set by the senior leadership team. They are modeled, they're emulated, and the better they communicate, which is why I love to talk to and work with leaders, because I know if they improve the way they communicate, it will have a cascading effect on everyone around them. And that is beautiful. That's how you can actually uplift the whole organization. And that is something that some leaders are open to, but unfortunately is that not all of them are.
We all tend to vastly overestimate our communication skills. And I say we, including myself.
Same.
Research shows that more than 4 out of 5 people say a relationship has been damaged by poor communication, but fewer than 1 in 5 say it was their fault. And we can all do that math, right?
It doesn't add up.
It doesn't. And also, we tend to think we have equal skills of communication in whatever platform. Right? If we're good at giving speeches, we think that makes us also good in conversation. It makes us think we're good at writing emails and newsletters and typing on Slack, but they don't translate, right? Like and also leaders often make the mistake of thinking that a paycheck is the number one motivator for workers. It is very much not. A focus on wages in terms of motivation for your employees results in higher turnover rates. Either the number one or number two motivations, things that employees say is the things that they want the most. It's always either in the number one or number two slot is empathic leadership.
Empathic leadership, yeah, yes. And that sense of belonging, right? To feel that, I belong here, we're in this together, I have clarity about the direction we're heading, so I'm not wasting my time.
I have value here, right? I'm heard, I'm supported, I have psychological safety, meaning I can feel safe bringing up an idea in a meeting and I won't be humiliated about it. I can make a mistake and I'm not going to be treated like a leper. All of these things are part of empathic leadership, but a big part of it is clear communication.
Yes.
That's not condescending and is not critical.
Yes. Where do I start as a leader? So I hear you, Celeste. What's one thing I can change today?
Send a note out to your team members or go and see them in person and say, hey, I'm working on my communication skills. And here's the number one thing I'm working on. I'm bad at interrupting people. So I want you, if I interrupt you, I want you to, tug on my shirt or whatever and help me get better. right?
That's great. I never heard this. I never heard this advice, that you should come clean and say, I'm working on it because I think I should improve. I want to improve. I'm working on it. But tell me if, where I go wrong. Nice.
Yeah, and it also makes it safe for other people to say, okay, what do I need to work on?
Yeah.
Right? What do I do badly? And you can say, okay, we're going to have a workshop or whatever in terms of communication, because communication training that focuses on clarity, that focuses on honesty, are incredibly effective.
Mm-hmm.
We have seen this in a lot of medical settings where there's a massive amount. I think it's over half of medical errors, preventable medical errors, are caused by poor communication. And when after they have done communication workshops, some of them as short as 3 hours, they've seen a massive reduction in medical errors, but also it took no more time. It didn't add to the time it took, but it actually reduced the number of errors. So, leaders with good communication skills add well over 40% of shareholder value to the company. There's just no downside. And so if you model that kind of behavior, the kind of humility that says, okay, I'm working on this. I realize I'm not getting it right, and we're going to do this together, it can change your entire culture.
And I think it actually signals confidence and status. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because if I'm saying that, it just shows I'm a super confident person. So
yeah.
I'm just thinking how to persuade leaders to apply this advice.
It increases trust among your employees, and trust is one of those things some of the principles, you cannot have growth without trust. And trust requires honesty. It requires transparency. It requires honesty, right? So, another great thing is that it will actually help you see your blind spots. You are the most biased person on the subject of you. So you can't see your own blind spots. Maybe you think that interrupting is your biggest flaw, but other people see a very different side of you. And so if you open it up, you might actually get this incredibly valuable information. You could pay a consultant, $100,000 to give you this information, or you could get it for free from your own coworkers. Adam Grant has done some great work on this. And he, some of the research that he has participated in and pointed to and highlighted has shown that the people who are the most accurate in terms of judging how your personality traits affect your work are your coworkers. They're more accurate, obviously, than yourself, the most biased, but they're also more accurate than your friends and your loved ones. It's your coworkers. So ask them.
Ask them. Yeah, that is brilliant advice. What is conversational narcissism?
So a sociologist came up with this term to talk about the very human tendency to turn conversations to the subject that we know the most about and that we're most confident talking about, which is ourselves. Right? So this is especially true in conversations where we might feel like we don't know what to say. So it comes up a lot when someone's talking about a painful experience they've had, or they come into work maybe and say, my dog died over the weekend, right? And you don't know what to say. And so you'll say, oh, I know how you feel. My dog died like 5 years ago. And it was really, really tough. Right?
Yeah. I was delayed at the airport for 3 hours. Oh, that's nothing. I was delayed for 5 hours last week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about the time we were stuck on the runway for, not to mention the fact that we have scientific evidence that we didn't need to tell us that travel delay stories make everybody miserable, right? Like it's this, but it comes up innocuously as well. Someone will say, oh, I got to go to the grocery store. And they're like, oh, I do too. And I also need to go to the blah, 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 blah. So he talks about it in terms of a switch response versus a support response. So someone comes in and says, my dog died over the weekend. You can switch and say, oh, I remember what that feels like. Or you can support and say, I'm so sorry. What was your dog's name? They want to talk to you about their dog.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they want to tell you what they lost.
Yeah.
So let them talk about their dog, right? As opposed to switching it so they need to spend some of their emotional energy that they need to worry about you and your dog that died 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Your TED Talk came out 9 or 10 years ago. The book on conversations, I think 2018, so also some time ago. Since then, communication technology has clearly improved. I'm not sure that our conversational skills have become better or worse. So how do you judge our conversational skills holistically as societies these days?
So our communication technology has, quote, improved. I really don't get... Okay, so again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but communication is the thing Homo sapiens do the best, period. That's the only way that we have survived as a species, right? Mm-hmm. So why we keep coming up with new ways to do the thing we already do better than any other technology, as opposed to coming up with ways to do the stuff to be better at the things we don't do well, like taxes or, any of the things we don't do well, right? Mm-hmm. Let's come up with new tech for that, because nothing, absolutely no technology is better than your voice and your ears.
Yes.
Period. I asked one scientist if at some point written technology, even just writing, would equal the voice in terms of effectiveness, and she said it's possible in 5,000 to 10,000 years.
It would take some time to adapt. Yeah, I think we forget that. Written communication is only a few thousand years old, whereas spoken
really
communication is,
recent.
I don't know, a few 100,000 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, we know from the histories of your country and the Nordic countries that people have been preserving history for a very long time through songs and super, super boring poems. Yeah. That's how we preserved
long and
history.
Boring, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God.
There was a lot of entertainment around at that
You
time.
make me read Beowulf one more time. That's how for most of 300,000 years we preserved knowledge. We passed knowledge along. We have evolved specifically in order to do that, right? We are evolved in order to learn through stories, relay information through stories, preserve knowledge orally. Now, I'm leaving out ASL and the whole deaf community, but there's equal effectiveness in terms of ASL and other languages for the
What's
hearing
ASL?
impaired.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, American Sign Language.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very similar in terms of effectiveness. But that's what we evolved to do. Writing is super recent.
Yeah. Yes.
And there's also great research showing that if you read someone's opinion in any written form, a book, an op-ed, a social media post, you are much more likely to dehumanize them, to not recognize them as a fellow human being, than if you hear that opinion, exact same opinion, from their own voice.
Yes.
Our voices allow us to recognize one another as human beings.
Yeah, I think we all know that, texting each other leads to a lot of miscommunication that could be avoided by just talking to each other.
Oh, absolutely. So when we say improved conversation technology, it's going the wrong direction. Our conversations are getting worse because we're trying to avoid doing the one thing we do best. It's like Whitney Houston going, I'm going to choose not to sing. Like the one thing you do really well, and you're like, I'm going to do this other thing instead. Yeah, that's a terrible idea.
Let's twiddle our thumbs and try to, type on a small screen. Yeah, great.
Exactly. Or cheetahs being like, I'm gonna, not try to outrun other animals. Like, what are you talking about?
Exactly. Play to your strengths, which is verbal communication. What impact do you think will AI have on our communication in the next couple of years?
It can only degrade it further. Years ago, I was brought in by Amazon to try to make Alexa converse more like a human being. And she's not a human being. She's not a she, right? She has all the flaws in thinking of a human being because they programmed her, but she cannot respond emotionally. She doesn't have a prefrontal cortex. She doesn't have a temporal parietal junction, so it's just not going to happen. AI is, it's going to be a disaster. And again, if we were using AI, if we were trying to develop AI to do the things that human beings weren't good at, if it weren't a climate disaster, I would probably be all for it. But we're not. We are yet again trying to use technology to replace the thing that humans do better than any other species. It is the dumbest, most short-sighted, stupid waste of trillions of dollars, since email. No, email has its place. Email has its place and its usefulness. It's just that almost 90% of workers would rather communicate through email than any other way, and it's, oh God, it's such a disaster.
Yeah. And then, you're taking AI is really interesting, and I take it very seriously. And I think the risk is that our communication skills will atrophy because we, hey, can you write this in a more empathetic language, etc., etc. So, it kind of suggests that we don't have to think about our communication anymore because AI does the thinking for it, which of course is an illusion.
It is an illusion. It's so backward. Let me take this back and explain how important this is, just how much of an existential threat AI is. For a very long time, evolutionary psychologists and biologists didn't know how Homo sapiens survived. Like, we are, I think one biologist described us as eminently killable. We are slow. We are thin-skinned. We don't have, a thick hide or armor or spikes or venom. We are very fragile. And Neanderthal was strong and fast and agile. They had bigger brains than we do. They practiced a rudimentary form of dentistry, right? There's no reason why Homo sapiens would outlast Neanderthal, except that human beings have the most sophisticated collaboration skills on the planet, which means if you're dealing with one human being, Homo sapiens, you are almost always dealing with more. It means a tiger can't come to your village night after night and drag another person out. Eventually, people will get together and they will be able to, as a group, overwhelm a stronger force.
Yeah. Yes.
But you need very sophisticated communication skills for that, right? Like, the only two species that can regularly take down a bison, they probably don't have bison in Germany.
No,
right?
we don't have bison.
Bison are, we're talking about a ton. They can jump 6 feet straight into the air. They can run 40, 50, 60 miles an hour. Like, they are
beasts.
Yeah. The only two species that can regularly take them down are Homo sapiens and wolves. Pack animals.
Yes.
So when you start degrading our communication skills, you are literally threatening the existence of our species. That's how we have survived. It is not through advanced intelligence, because the more we know about animals, the more we realize we probably are not the smartest species on the planet. It is not through our strength. Come on, we're not stronger than a gorilla.
Nope.
We're not faster than most animals. Mosquitoes take us down. If you look at the actual, pecking order, we're pretty far down in terms of prey.
Yes.
But as we lose and degrade these communication skills, our ability to talk to another human being using our voice, this beautiful advanced technology in our throats, we are threatening the survival of the species.
So what should we do? Should we not use AI for communication purposes?
Yes.
Or should we use it in a smarter way?
Don't use the AI for communication purposes.
No. Okay.
Period.
Yeah.
And also start using your phone as a phone.
Yeah.
Just pick up the phone. That phone call is going to be faster. We know it's going to lower your heart rate. It'll lower your cortisol levels. It'll relax your muscles, probably. It's going to lift your mood. That phone call you're avoiding is super good for you. So
yes, especially if you walk and talk, right? I love to go on a walk and then just call friends or family and have a conversation, and you get these two things which are, as you said, reduce stress, get things cleared out, and it's
three things actually, because most likely you're seeing some form of nature while you're walking. So not only are you getting the endorphins of the exercise and that great physiological and psychological boost of the phone call, but we know that seeing trees is in some cases better for you than an antidepressant. Don't stop taking your antidepressants.
This is not medical advice.
Right, this is not medical
communications
advice.
Experts.
But it's just really good for you. Yeah. So your walk and talks are great for you. Yeah. Like a huge boost.
Yes, I love them, and I can only recommend it because otherwise you just have more video calls, you have more emails, you more hours in front of a screen. So it's great for your eyesight. Lots of advantages.
Yeah, now, get a dog. Take a walk with your dog a couple times a day, and call people on the phone.
Well, I have cats, but they don't come on walks. That's the problem.
Yeah,
that's the snag in the system of cats. I wanted to ask you on a more serious note about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a big part of what you do these days. And I wanted to ask you about having sensible conversations about something that's been so politicized and also means different things to different people in different areas of the world. So what's your take on DEI at the moment, and how should we approach it in organizations?
So it's always bring it down to the most micro level you can. Don't talk about people, talk about you, right? Because when you talk about inclusion, we just mean not making people feel excluded because of who they are. That's all that means. It means if you're uncomfortable at work, it shouldn't be because of the person you are. And frankly, that includes, in the United States, includes a conservative. If you're going to work and you're being, picked on because of your political views, I don't want that for you. That's what inclusion means. And we all know what exclusion feels like, right? We all went to high school. We all, maybe have gone to a party where we didn't know anybody. We've all started a new job and felt like, very excluded.
It goes to it's one of the worst experiences as a human being, because we're evolved to be, in our tribe, in our group. So exclusion feels
belong.
Horrible.
Yeah. And so we know what that feels like. And so all DEI is saying is, let's try to not make anybody feel that way because of who they are. Now, if their behavior is reprehensible, if they do awful things, okay. But it shouldn't be because they grew up in a small town, or they came from some other country, or they went to a public university instead of an Ivy League. It should be because they're awful. And it's the same thing with equity. It's like in the United States, they like to talk about meritocracy a lot, which is bogus. Obviously, we're not a meritocracy. But everyone can understand that people should have an equal opportunity to get ahead. That if you're a brilliant kid, you should have a chance to get educated and succeed in life. Everyone can understand that. Politicians like to say, this is about some people wanting a free ride. Nope. So if you just bring it down to this basic, think about going to your holiday dinner. Tell me about the diversity at that table. Very different people with very different views. That's also what diversity is. Diversity also means people's weight, people's height, where they grew up. It means all the beautiful differences in our species. All the ways in which we are different. That's all that means, and not punishing people because of those differences. So it has become a political football, but it shouldn't be. Most people, most Americans, believe in the principles of DEI, even though they've been fooled. Some of them have been fooled into thinking they don't. They do.
Do you therefore think that it needs to be rebranded almost, because the term has become this political hot potato, in order to establish these principles of justice and fairness further, that it needs a different term?
Yeah, and I don't care about changing terms. I run a nonprofit, Headway, which does training, science-based training in this field, right? Like everything that we teach has been rigorously tested, and it works. Because so much of DEI training globally is incredibly expensive and doesn't do a damn thing to fix the problem.
So what makes it work? Can you give us a principle that you have to do it this way, not that way, for it to resonate?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of specific techniques that actually are shown to work. One of them, for example, is a structured mentoring programs that go throughout the entire organization. Another one, of course, is sort of blind hiring techniques. There's very specific things, but one of the main ones is that a lot of inherent bias trainings, which is the most common type of training people get in a workplace, focus on changing your values. Right? Mm-hmm. We're going to show you we're going to tell you all these horrible stories about discrimination and bias, and tell you what happened to so-and-so when they got sexually harassed. And that's going to show you how bad this is. And then you're going to not discriminate anymore. not going to do discrimination anymore. But we have no idea how to change someone's values. What we do know a lot about is how to change someone's behavior.
Yes, and it's easier to change behavior than strongly held beliefs. Also, it seems to be an attack on people's identity, because whatever identity we have, it probably includes the notion that we are good people. So in a way, if you suggest to people that they are bad people, oh, I'm not a bad person. Oh, you're so bad, you don't even know you're bad. I just fail to see how that is constructive and will change anyone's behavior.
Well, and most of these programs absolutely start exactly where they end exactly where they should start. You know, when we're training people, we say, look, you are biased. Spoiler alert, I'm biased, you're biased. Maybe I'm not biased against African Americans because I am African American, but I probably have a bias against short people or, you know, people who didn't get a college education. Those are almost everybody is biased against older people. That's a super common bias. So let's start there. We're all biased. You're not going to be able to get rid of all your bias. That's not going to happen. So let's figure out how to move forward and be fair to everybody. In spite of that, let's figure out how we can design a system that's fair. That's where you go from, because changing behavior is really quite simple, right?
Yes.
Like marketers know all about how to get us to buy this thing and not that thing at the grocery store. So we can use that to our advantage to make our workplaces more equitable. And everybody likes it better once those changes are made.
Yeah.
Even the people who say they hate DEI training actually enjoy the equitable, fair, inclusive workplace more than they do the former.
And it's good for business, right? To have that internal culture, and also most businesses sell to diverse audiences, so it makes perfect sense in that way. It's just become sort of political hot potato.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you about your latest book called Do Nothing. And I have to say, I read it a few weeks ago on vacation, obviously perfect time to read it. And, you know, it's interesting because you're obviously a very busy person. You're very accomplished. You've done a lot, and I'm sure you do a lot still. Yet you wrote a book called Do Nothing. How do I square the circle? Yeah,
it's funny. Sometimes I get asked this question like it's a gotcha question. Like, you're telling us to do nothing. Yeah, no, I know yours isn't.
I'm curious.
But it's what I've discovered since I wrote that book, because up to writing that book, I tell the story of how driven I was, and just unsustainably. But since I did all that research and wrote that book and suggest ways to break away from the hustle culture, I get just the same amount, if not actually more, done in much less time. I have a ton of time to just screw off and do absolutely nothing valuable at all.
How?
Right? I have the time to work out, and I have hobbies and take my dog for walks for between 2 and 4 miles every day. How? There's a number of ways that I lay out. I'll give you one example. And this is what I've been working on lately, is I stay as far away from my cell phone as possible. So, you know, Angela Duckworth talks about this quite a bit, that the function of your brain increases with every foot away your phone is from you.
Wow.
So like at home, I have regular phones. So I have like an actual phone.
Oh, okay. So if you're only listening, this is an old school, not just a landline, but one I haven't seen since my childhood.
Yeah, and it's not an actual landline. What I have is a device that connects to my smartphone through Bluetooth. So I switch it over, and if a call comes in on my smartphone, I answer it on a landline, which means I can just leave my cell phone in the other room all day, because text notifications will show up on my watch, and I can decide whether I want to pay attention to them or not. Usually not. And I answer on the landline. And I got to tell you, I just turned in my latest book to the publisher, a book that's over 90,000 words long. And I implemented all of the edits, the first round of edits in that book, in 2 days' time.
Wow.
Because that's the kind of deep focus I was able to click into simply by not staring at effing screens and having my phone next to me, interrupting me all the time. So that's one thing I did. I also went through and did an audit on my own schedule, right? Like, ask yourself how much time you want to spend on social media every day, right? Like, well, you take it one step before that. How much of conscious time do you have every day, right? This is how much I sleep. This is how much I commute to work, if you do. This is how much time I spend on lunch, blah, 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 blah. And it's going to leave you, this is how much time I'm spending at work. It's going to leave you with, this is my amount of free time every day, right? For most people, it's somewhere around 5 hours, somewhere between 3 and 6 of hours of free time. How much of that 5 hours do you want to spend on social media? Because for most people, they're spending much more time on social media than they think. And when you start to do an audit and actually track your time, I found out I was spending like over 2 hours a day on social media.
So there's like 40% or 50 or more percent of the actually available free time we have, just, rinsing through our fingers because we're looking at a screen, but not really getting much out of it, probably.
Yeah. So of course I didn't have time to go to the gym.
Yeah.
And we don't realize it, right? It's like we're sitting in front of a movie and with a bag of Doritos and just mindlessly eating until the whole bag's gone. That's the way we're squandering our time. Yeah. So those are just 2 ways right there. Step away from your phone, get it out of your peripheral vision, and also audit your time.
Perfect. So do nothing doesn't mean don't do anything ever. It just means that be so focused and efficient and mindful about how you spend your time that there's enough time left, a few hours every day, that you can do nothing, which, by the way, also leads to better conversations in my experience. Do nothing means, spend time doing nothing productive. You don't need to be contributing to capitalism every moment of your day. Well, 24/7.
You don't. Doing nothing doesn't mean inactive. Idleness doesn't mean you're not active. A fisherman is active while idle, right? So it has nothing to do with your activity level. It means you're not trying to make money or improve your brand.
Yes. And often the best ideas, not just for work, but for play, for everything, relationships come when we are idle, and let's not forget that. So we kind of need that creative space so that can actually germinate those ideas.
Yes.
What's your new book about?
So I had I published a book just after the pandemic that was called Speaking of Race, which is. It's supposed to be how to talk about racism, but it's really how to have difficult conversations. Mm-hmm. And then this one is actually entirely different from those other 3 books, right? This one's actually about my own family. It tells a story of my great-grandmother, who was born enslaved on a plantation in Georgia, the state of Georgia, and went on to do incredible things, be one of the founders of the NAACP and open the very first library for African Americans in the state of Arkansas and all these other wonderful things. And, Black women, especially in the United States, their history has been very much buried and intentionally forgotten. So I'm just trying to pull that history back out so we don't lose it completely.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it. Celeste, unfortunately, our time is almost coming to an end. So what's your best piece of communications advice?
My best piece of communications advice is put away the screens. Turn away the screens. The screens are so distracting to your mind. And we think that when we sit down at a table to have lunch with a friend and we we mute our phone, we think that does it, but it's not the way our brain works, right? Just the presence of the phone is really distracting your brain. True. So get it out of your eye line.
Get it off your eye line. Feeds away to increase the potency of our brains. Where can people keep up with everything you do? What's the best place to check out?
I mean, I have a website like everyone else does, CelesteHeadlee.com. Social media is difficult because I keep having to leave platforms.
Oh dear.
So I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram, but for a very short period of time. I'm just getting ready to leave Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn. But yeah, it's tough these days. The social media situation is tough.
Not going to ask you about email anyway, so that much is clear from the beginning. Celeste, I appreciate everything you've done. You contributed to the field and all the brilliant ideas you put out. So thank you a lot for taking time to talk us through your latest ideas and everything you've done so far. Thank you.
My pleasure. You're welcome. Have a good one.